At family dinner, my sister raised her glass and said, "Where's your husband and kids?" "Oh, right, you don't have any," while I'd been paying all their bills for years. I set down my fork and replied, "Where's your money?" "Oh, right, I've been supporting you until today." The room went dead silent. My parents' faces froze mid-laugh. Brooke's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. For the first time in my 32 years, I had their complete, undivided attention. What they didn't know was that I wasn't just their reliable cash machine anymore. I was Grace Whitaker, Senior Financial Systems Analyst at Meridian Tech, pulling in $127,000 annually designing fraud detection algorithms for Fortune 500 companies. While they saw me as the quiet pushover sister who worked with computers and spreadsheets, I'd actually spent the last 8 years building expertise in financial crimes, forensic accounting, and legal compliance systems. My professional network included federal investigators, white-collar crime attorneys, and forensic accountants who specialized in family financial fraud. I had access to credit monitoring systems, asset tracking tools, and legal resources that could unravel their entire financial house of cards if I chose to use them. But they had no idea about any of that. To them, I was just Grace, the unmarried, childless daughter who existed to subsidize their lifestyle while they mocked me for not having what they considered a real life. The numbers were staggering when I calculated them later that night. Over the past 7 years, I'd transferred $94,000 to keep their lives comfortable. Dad's mortgage payments when his consulting work dried up, Mom's medical bills and prescription costs, Brooke's rent, car payments, credit card minimums, and every emergency that somehow became my responsibility. I documented everything with the meticulous precision of someone who built financial tracking systems for a living. Every wire transfer, every Venmo payment, every check I'd written was cataloged in a secure database I maintained for tax purposes. What started as basic record keeping had become a comprehensive audit trail of their financial dependency. The Sunday dinner confrontation wasn't spontaneous. It was the breaking point of a systematic pattern of financial and emotional abuse that I'd finally recognized for what it was. They'd trained me to believe that family love meant bankrolling their choices while accepting mockery as the price of belonging. That Monday morning, I implemented the first phase of what I privately called Project Independence. I canceled every recurring transfer, blocked their access to my emergency credit cards, and moved my savings into accounts they couldn't track or guilt me about. Then I activated my professional network. My first call was to Amanda Foster, a forensic accountant I'd worked with on 3 major corporate embezzlement cases. She specialized in family financial abuse and had testified in dozens of cases where relatives had exploited their children's earnings. "Grace, I've been waiting for this call for 2 years, Amanda said when I explained the situation. "Based on what you've told me previously about your family dynamics, this was inevitable. Let me review your documentation and we'll build a complete financial impact assessment." Within 48 hours, Amanda had quantified the scope of their exploitation. Beyond the $94,000 in direct transfers, she'd identified $31,000 in opportunity costs. Vacations I'd skipped to pay their bills, investments I couldn't make because my money was tied up in their emergencies, professional development courses I'd postponed because they needed just this one favor. But the real revelation came when she pulled their credit reports with my written authorization as someone who'd co-signed several accounts. "Grace, they've been using your financial stability as collateral for debts you don't even know about," she explained. "Your father has a $45,000 home equity line of credit that lists you as a backup income source. Your mother opened 2 store credit cards using your employment information as a reference." My second call was to Marcus Webb, a collections defense attorney who'd consulted on several cases where my fraud detection algorithms had uncovered family theft schemes. Marcus specialized in situations where relatives had financially exploited their children under the guise of family obligation. "This is textbook financial abuse," Marcus told me during our consultation. They've created a system where you're legally and emotionally responsible for their choices while having no control over their spending. The technical term is economic exploitation of adult children, and it's more common than people realize. Marcus outlined my legal options, which were more extensive than I'd expected. I could pursue restitution through civil court, have myself removed from any accounts where my income was used as qualification without proper authorization, and most importantly, establish legal boundaries that would prevent future financial manipulation. The key here is documentation, Marcus explained. You've got 7 years of financial records showing a pattern of one-way transfers with no repayment plan or formal agreement. That's evidence of exploitation, not family assistance. My third strategic consultation was with Dr. Rachel Voss, a licensed clinical social worker who specialized in family financial trauma. I'd worked with her on cases where employees were being financially exploited by relatives, and she understood the psychological manipulation tactics that made these situations so difficult to escape. Grace, what you're describing isn't generosity being misunderstood, Dr. Voss explained during our session. It's systematic conditioning. They've trained you to equate your worth with your financial usefulness, then mock you for not having the life experiences that your sacrifices made impossible for you to afford. Dr. Voss helped me understand that the Sunday dinner mockery wasn't casual cruelty. It was a deliberate strategy to keep me insecure and dependent on their approval, making me more likely to continue the financial support to prove my value to the family. By Thursday of that first week, my phone was buzzing constantly with increasingly desperate messages from my family. Mom's texts started guilt-heavy. "Sweetheart, the mortgage payment didn't go through. Did something happen with the bank?" By Wednesday, Dad's messages had turned accusatory. "Grace, your mother is crying. Fix this immediately." But it was Brooke's messages that revealed their true desperation. "Grace, I know you're having some kind of breakdown, but my rent is due Friday. People are counting on me." She'd gone from mocking my childless life to demanding I fund hers in less than a week. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I spent that week preparing for the inevitable confrontation with the strategic planning skills I'd developed through years of corporate crisis management. When you're designing systems to detect financial fraud, you learn to think several moves ahead and prepare for every possible counter-strategy. Friday afternoon brought the call I'd been expecting. Dad using his authoritative economics professor voice. "Grace, we're having an emergency family meeting Sunday. You will be there at 2 p.m. This childish tantrum ends now." "I'll be there," I replied calmly. But what I didn't tell him was that I'd be bringing documentation that would end their financial manipulation permanently. That Sunday, I drove to Tacoma with a leather portfolio containing 7 years of financial records, legal consultation notes, and a comprehensive analysis of their spending patterns. I also brought something they'd never seen before: absolute confidence in my own position. The house looked exactly the same, but my perspective had completely changed. Instead of seeing the home I'd helped save from foreclosure, I saw a property maintained with my earnings while the owners mocked my life choices. Inside, the atmosphere was tense and theatrical. Mom was dabbing her eyes with tissues, clearly performing grief for my benefit. Dad sat at the head of the table like a disappointed CEO about to deliver quarterly bad news. Brooke was dramatically scrolling through her phone, occasionally sighing loudly to emphasize how much I was inconveniencing her. "Grace," Mom began with her practiced tremolo, "we don't understand what's happened to you. We're family. We support each other." I set my portfolio on the table and opened it to the first page, a spreadsheet showing every transfer I'd made over 7 years, with running totals by category and recipient. "You're right, Mom. We should support each other. That's why I'm curious about when this support becomes reciprocal." Dad leaned forward, trying to establish dominance through posture. "Grace, you're being ridiculous. Family helps family. That's how we raised you." Actually, Dad, let me show you how you raised me. I slid the second document across the table. Amanda's analysis of their spending patterns funded by my earnings. This is a forensic accounting analysis of money flow in our family. Over 7 years, the transfers have been 100% unidirectional. I've provided $94,000 in direct support, with an additional $31,000 in opportunity costs. Brooke looked up from her phone for the first time. You're keeping score? That's so pathetic, Grace. I'm keeping records, Brooke, because I'm a financial analyst and I track expenses systematically. Would you like to see your personal total? I turned to page 3, which detailed every payment I'd made for her rent, car, credit cards, student loans, and various emergencies over the years. The number was $34,000. That's not even counting the social costs, I continued, pulling out Dr. Voss's psychological impact assessment. Like how I've been mocked for not having a husband or children while spending the money that might have funded dating, travel, or life experiences on subsidizing your lifestyle choices. The room had gone completely quiet. Mom's tissue dabbing had stopped. Dad's authoritative posture had deflated slightly. Brooke was actually looking at the numbers instead of her phone. But here's what's really interesting, I said, moving to the documentation Marcus had prepared. It turns out that using my income as qualification for credit and loans without my explicit consent violates several consumer protection statutes. My attorney has identified at least 3 accounts where my financial information was used improperly. Dad's face had gone pale. Grace, you called a lawyer? Against your own family? I consulted with legal counsel about my rights, yes, because apparently family doesn't protect me from financial exploitation. I have to protect myself. I pulled out the final document, a formal notice prepared by Marcus's office. This is a legal notification that I'm withdrawing financial support effective immediately, and that any future use of my income or credit information without written authorization will be pursued through civil court. Mom started crying. Real tears this time, not performance tears. Grace, please, we can't survive without your help. You know your father's consulting work is inconsistent. My medical bills are enormous. We'll lose the house. Mom, you'll need to make the same choices every other family makes when their income doesn't cover their expenses. Downsize, budget, prioritize. The same advice Dad gave other people as an economics professor. Brooke had finally put her phone down completely. Grace, you can't just abandon us. We're your family. No, Brooke. Family doesn't mock each other for being single while demanding financial support for their relationship choices. Family doesn't laugh about someone being childless while expecting them to finance everyone else's lifestyle. I stood up and closed the portfolio. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm establishing healthy boundaries. You're all adults with college degrees and work potential. You can support yourselves like I've been supporting all of us. Dad made one last attempt at authority. Grace, sit down. We're not finished discussing this. Actually, Dad, we are finished. I've provided detailed financial records, legal documentation, and clear boundaries. What happens next depends on your choices, not mine. As I walked toward the door, Mom called out desperately, Grace, what about Thanksgiving, Christmas? Are you really going to destroy our family over money? I turned back from the doorway. I'm not destroying anything, Mom. I'm just no longer funding it. If our family relationships were based on more than my bank account, they'll survive. If they weren't, then we never really had a family. We had a financial arrangement disguised as one. The drive back to Seattle felt different than every other Sunday for the past 7 years. Instead of guilt and resentment, I felt something I'd almost forgotten, possibility. For the first time since college, my paycheck would be entirely my own to save, invest, or spend on experiences I'd been postponing for nearly a decade. Over the next month, the consequences of their financial dependency became apparent. Dad had to actually pursue consulting work instead of waiting for assignments to find him. Mom had to negotiate payment plans with medical providers instead of assuming I'd cover the balance. Brooke had to move to a cheaper apartment and take a full-time job instead of treating her influencer hobby as a career. The family gathering invitations stopped coming. Extended relatives who'd never questioned why I was always paying for group dinners suddenly had opinions about my selfishness. But something interesting happened. A few cousins privately reached out to thank me for setting boundaries they wished they'd had the courage to set with their own parents. 3 months after the confrontation, I received a text from Mom. "Grace, I've been reflecting on our conversation. Would you be willing to meet for coffee? I'd like to apologize and discuss how we can rebuild our relationship on healthier terms." I considered the invitation carefully. She'd used apologize instead of explain. She'd acknowledged that our relationship needed rebuilding instead of assuming I'd eventually come back. She'd mentioned healthier terms instead of requesting more financial assistance. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop in Bellevue, halfway between our homes. Mom looked tired but more present than I'd seen her in years. Instead of the performed emotional manipulation I was used to, she seemed genuinely reflective. "Grace, I want you to know that your father and I have been attending financial counseling," she said. "We realize that relying on you for so many years prevented us from learning to manage our own resources properly." She explained that Dad had gotten serious about building his consulting practice and had actually landed 2 regular clients. They downsized to a smaller apartment and consolidated their debts into manageable payments. Most importantly, they'd removed my name from all accounts and credit applications. "I also want to apologize for not defending you when Brooke made those cruel comments about your life," Mom continued. "I realize now that we were mocking you for not having experiences that you sacrificed so we could live comfortably. That was unconscionable." The conversation lasted 2 hours. It wasn't a magical reconciliation, but it was honest acknowledgement of damage done and concrete steps toward repair. Mom didn't ask for money or suggest resuming financial support. She only asked if I'd be willing to rebuild a relationship based on mutual respect instead of financial dependency. 6 months later, I had coffee with Brooke. She'd moved to Portland, gotten a marketing job at a sustainable fashion company, and was living within her means for the first time since college. The conversation was awkward, but genuine. "Grace, I need to apologize for that dinner," she said. "I was cruel about your personal life while living off your financial support. I can see now how twisted that was." She explained that having to support herself had actually improved her life in unexpected ways. She'd discovered skills she didn't know she had, built friendships based on shared interests rather than financial convenience, and started dating someone who appreciated her work ethic instead of her social media presence. "I also realized that I never actually thanked you for all those years of support," Brooke added. "I just assumed it would continue forever, which was entitled and unfair." Today, 18 months after that Sunday dinner confrontation, my relationship with my family is completely different but significantly healthier. We have monthly dinners where everyone pays their own way, and conversations focus on our lives and interests rather than financial stress. Mom and Dad have rebuilt their financial independence and seem more confident and engaged than they were when I was subsidizing their lifestyle. I've used the money I'm no longer transferring to them to take a dream vacation to Japan, invest in a diversified portfolio that's already growing substantially, and enroll in a master's program that will advance my career. I'm also dating someone I met through the hiking club I finally had time and energy to join. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never stood up to their mockery that Sunday night. Would I still be sitting at their table, funding their lifestyle while accepting their insults as the price of family belonging? Would I still be defining my worth through their approval and my bank balance? The most important thing I learned is that real family relationships can't survive on financial dependency and emotional manipulation, but authentic relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care can thrive even after difficult confrontations and necessary boundary setting. My family had to almost fall apart before we could build something healthier, but the result was relationships where everyone brings value instead of just one person bringing money. If you're reading this and recognizing your own family dynamics, know that setting financial boundaries isn't cruelty. It's often the only way to discover whether your relationships are based on love or exploitation. And sometimes, the people who fight your boundaries hardest are the ones who most need to learn how to stand on their own.